All right, everybody, welcome again to another rapid fire office hour in real time, responding to what's actually going on in California at the moment, which, of course, the big story right now is the approach of now Tropical Storm Hilary and mainly the severe flood-related impacts that this is likely to have, especially on the eastern slopes of the mountains in Southern California, as well as both the lower and higher deserts of southeastern California. And I would extend that now as well to some of the eastern slopes of the southern Sierra Nevada. So talking especially Kern County, but also perhaps parts of Inyo County as well. So thanks for joining. I expect to have a lot of people on this one again. It looks like it's already ramping up. That this is going to be of increasing interest actually as the evening goes on, because the storm-related impacts in many areas are only just beginning. There are a lot of things I want to cover today, including why some spots have already been hit quite hard and other spots have not been hit very hard at all, and how that might or might not change moving forward. Summarize what's happened so far, what's likely to come. I will actually be joining the ABC7 LA live stream later this evening directly. I know some of you may be watching through that now, but that will be something else. I'll be on again live there in a few hours, and I may even, depending on how things go this evening, I may even do yet another impromptu YouTube session, but that will be pretty last minute. Will depend on how things develop in the coming hours. And the main reason I say that is, again, much of the predicted extreme rainfall and potentially very serious flood risk has not yet occurred and is not expected to have occurred yet. So that is consistent with predictions. All right, so where are we now? Tropical Storm Hilary, and the storm did weaken exactly as predicted to a strong tropical storm strength as of around noon today. Made its first landfall in northern Baja California, so down in Mexico, meaning that technically the storm has made landfall. However, this storm is essentially paralleling the coast in a north and even northwestward direction, so north-northwest prevailing trajectory right now. And the coastline between northern Baja California and southern California is aligned similarly, essentially north-northwest oriented. So there is at least a slight chance that the center of circulation of tropical 70 miles an hour with stronger gusts could potentially make a second landfall later this evening somewhere in Southern California between the Mexican border near Imperial Beach and perhaps southeastern Los Angeles County. Most likely, the storm will remain just inland, and by just inland I mean the center may pass between San Diego and El Cajon. So this is barely a near-miss landfall if it doesn't actually make a second landfall in the U.S., but ultimately it doesn't matter. That's mainly just a piece of trivia, whether or not the official landfall remains on the Mexican side of the border, or whether there is a second landfall north of the international border. It doesn't really matter in terms of the effects this storm is going to have on the region. So what are the effects the storm is having and will have? So far, rains have ramped up, in some places more than others. Right now, there is a widespread region of moderate to heavy rain from about northern Orange County northward all the way to Ridgecrest, so that includes much of Los Angeles County, where there has been some urban and street flooding today. Nothing extreme in LA County, but definitely water on the rain in many places, over 2 inches of rain in some other spots. Again, just getting started. Heavier rainfall is actually occurring in the mountains and to the east of the mountains, where torrential rain bands have now, as predicted, formed over the southeastern California deserts, and the initial stages of flash flooding has begun. In fact, many roads and highways are already closed due to water, boulders, and mud on the road. That is going to get worse as the afternoon continues and as the evening goes on. Again, as I've been emphasizing over and over again, particularly from the crest of the Southern California mountains, that both the transverse ranges and the peninsular ranges, that covers essentially all of the mountains in Southern California, fall into one of those categories, either along the crest and all the way down the eastern slopes in particular. Locally, it could occur also on the south-facing slopes, especially in places like LA and Riverside and San Bernardino counties. But generally, the highest flash flood risk, as has been predicted all along, remains from the crest of the mountains eastward and then into the deserts. And that extends all the way northward toward Death Valley and even portions of southern Nevada. The far southeastern flank of the Sierra Nevada, so also the easternmost part of Kern County, also may be experiencing significant flooding by later this evening if they aren't already. So that is the axis of where the flooding is expected to be worst. Things are still ramping up. What was at one point this morning widespread light to moderate rain has now become widespread moderate to heavy rain. And behind that sort of uniform shield of moderate to heavy rain are individual bands, squall lines associated with the tropical storm itself, where rain has been falling anywhere from 1 to 2 inches per hour in the deserts. So we're talking from the southeastern California all the way down to the Mexican border in the Imperial Valley. Rain is now torrentially heavy near Indio and Borrego Springs, areas like that. So the Coachella Valley is now getting hit hard, is going to continue to get hit hard for many hours. So whatever flooding there is that is going on right now, even if it's not very extreme yet, there's a lot more rain where that came from, especially in that part of southeastern California. What is interesting is that essentially the part of California closest to the center of the storm, more coastal San Diego County, including San Diego itself, has probably seen the calmest weather of all places with expectations, because in San Diego County, because of the positioning of the tropical station almost directly to the south of San Diego. Right now it's about 75 miles almost due south of Imperial Beach. The winds are from the east. They're downsloping. Those are drying winds. And so the mountains are both sort of intercepting the strongest winds. There have been some wind gusts up above 80 miles an hour so far in the San Diego County mountains, but there hasn't been very much wind down at ocean level in San Diego County. That's because the mountains are both blocking the wind and intercepting a lot of the precipitation. So San Diego is ironically in the rain shadow because, again, winds are from east to west, which is the opposite direction that winds usually are from during, say, a winter storm. That's why there's so much water falling on the eastern slopes and not yet as much on the western slopes in San Diego County. I do think that rain still, even along the coast, and wind as well, is going to pick up over the next few hours because the tropical storm, it is still at tropical storm strength, and it is going to move essentially directly overhead San Diego. So the current most likely track is probably just 5 or 10 miles inland from the coast between San Diego and El Cajon, but it could still end up slightly offshore and then making a second landfall somewhere along the San Diego coast. So those two things both remain possibilities this evening. It won't really affect impacts, except that it will affect probably the wind direction in San Diego proper. But everywhere else, the expected severe flood risk is going to continue to unfold no matter what. So unfortunately, I can't share graphics with you right now. This would be a really great day to do that because there's some really complex things going on and interesting things. That's mainly due to technical issues. I did want to update folks, though, that thanks to support from folks who knew that crowdsourcing could be so effective, I will be getting new hardware this week. So although that doesn't help me today for this event, hopefully this won't be a problem again in the future. Fingers strongly crossed that's the problem and not the copper wire for the internet somewhere in the neighborhood, which is going to be a harder problem to crack. But anyway, I'm pretty sure it's hardware related, and in which case that should be fixed by the hardware that I got to go pick up later this week. So thank you again for that. As far I wanted to emphasize, and if you see my eyes moving off screen, sometimes I'm reading comments, but in this case I'm also taking a look at my phone and the radar screen there because I actually can't keep it open on the same machine that's doing the live streaming. Again, that should change later this week, but for now I'm just glancing at things. It does look like the rain is starting to pick up again in San Diego, but again, the main threat of genuinely dangerous and life-threatening flooding is going to be not so much in the core of the SoCal metros in San Diego and Los Angeles, and instead it's going to be from the crest of the mountains eastward into the deserts, and then northeastward all the way, perhaps as far north as Highway 50 in Nevada. So all of those places are going to There are some population centers, of course. There's also some very remote stretches of desert out there. There's some national parks, of course, Death Valley National Park, Joshua Tree, and a number of other national parks and monuments in that area. So there is stuff out there. Lots of people do now today live in the Coachella Valley, and on the eastern flanks of the mountains in LA County, up in the Antelope Valley. So Lancaster, Palmdale, these are all regions that are potentially at risk of major flash flooding later this evening. The flooding you're seeing right now, and there probably is some, but it probably isn't super extreme yet, is going to escalate further. The Weather Prediction Center from the NOAA that is responsible for these mesoscale type discussions for regions of unusual extreme weather have highlighted the possibility of rainfall rates, again, not total accumulations, but rates in an instantaneous sense of 2 to 3 inches per hour in some of these spiral bands that are just beginning to form now across the southeastern deserts and move up the eastern slopes of the mountains. And these are starting to materialize. I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm counting at least 7 separate flash flood warnings now, all on the eastern side of the mountains and in the deserts. So the Salton Sea area has seen extremely heavy rainfall and flash flooding so far. That will continue this evening, and this is going to continue to shift northward as the evening goes on. But again, the center of the storm is still south of California. It's still either right along the Mexican coastline, far northern Baja. This will probably in the next 2 to 3 hours move over or just east of San Diego. That does not mean that San Diego is going to see the strongest winds and rains. In a tropical cyclone, the strongest winds and rains are almost always on the eastern side of the storm and the northeastern sides of the storm. That continues to mean that these same regions that have already been hit pretty hard with rain are going to get a lot more rain the rest of the afternoon and straight through the overnight hours. In fact, the rain may continue to intensify for hours. So in some cases, the worst is definitely yet to come. In some cases, you may not be experiencing much of any adverse weather. San Diego County, as I mentioned, has ironically, despite being closer to the center of the storm than anywhere else in California, has yet to receive any really alarming conditions. It's breezy and kind of drizzly and very humid and muggy and kind of weird tropical atmosphere, but nothing destructive yet. In the western part, anyway, of San Diego County, but there's a very different story right now in the mountains and in the deserts, where flash flooding is numerous locations, as far as I can tell. And so, what is going on here with the forecast? Well, it's pretty much consistent with the forecast that we've had all along. Hilary remained within the Hurricane Center cone of uncertainty, as far as I can tell, throughout its entire lifespan, and continues to be within that cone. The first official landfall occurred in Mexico. There's a chance there could be a second landfall near San Diego, but even if there isn't, again, that doesn't really matter in terms of the impacts. One thing I'm noticing right now online in social media today especially is unfortunately Twitter or X or whatever it's called this week is really it's becoming an almost impossibly messy place for information sharing and communication. There's a lot of unreliable information there. Lots of people are sharing images and videos from completely different events in other parts of the world. I'm seeing a lot of footage from events that occurred months or years ago in Peru or Saudi Arabia, and they're being billed as what's happening in Southern California. On the other side of things, there are people claiming that the storm is, of course, fake news, that the Weather Channel is out to perpetuate its agenda, whatever that might be. Just want to clarify that there is indeed a tropical storm very close to Southern California that will move over Southern California later this evening, and their life-threatening and potentially up to catastrophic flooding is still expected due to these tropical downpours and these spiral rain bands, particularly on the east side of the storm. Not so much in San Diego City and LA City proper, but more so in the mountains and in the deserts to the east. And the interesting thing is that there are also some technical reasons why I think some folks are a bit confused as to what's going on. A lot of folks are used to using weather apps, which have been really terrible, honestly, almost across the board. see my interview with the Slate TBD podcast from earlier this year if you want to hear more about my thoughts on weather apps and why they're usually very bad. But today, I think one of the problems is that the radar imagery in Southern California is very fragmented. So there are radar sites near San Diego, near Santa Ana, near Los Angeles, near Vandenberg Air Force Base up on the Central Coast, at Edwards Air Force Base in the high desert, and then the other one that would probably be relevant, and this is one I've been using a lot today actually, believe it or not, is in Yuma, Arizona. That is the closest radar site to where most of the extreme weather is currently occurring, on the east sides of the mountains and in the deserts. And so that Yuma, Arizona radar site paints a completely different picture of what's happening on the east side. Well, there's lots of folks saying the radar shows it's not even raining east of San Diego, so this storm is a bust. Well, that's not true. The radar beam coming out of San Diego is, of course, blocked by the mountains that rise immediately to the east of San Diego. So it literally cannot see whether or not it's raining east of those mountains. That's why there are other radar installations to the east. And the same thing is true of the Yuma site. If you use the Yuma radar, you'll be able to see the rain that's falling all the way up to the crest of the mountains in Southern California, but not west of there. So you have to toggle back and forth. Lots of websites and apps do not do this. They do not have a spatial interpolation. They don't stitch together these disparate images in this data. Lots of folks with their own theories as to what's going on there. Well, the reality is very simple. There are mountains there, and when you bounce microwave beams off of mountains, it doesn't go through the mountain. That is literally all that's going on there. But the practical implication is that depending on where you are in Southern California, it's actually very difficult to navigate real-time radar information because you need to know where the radar is relative to the local mountains and which radar sites are going to have the beams blocked by topography. So in this case, there are a bunch of different radar sites that you can choose between. Don't use just one and assume it's telling you the whole story, because right now, for example, you'd look at the San Diego radar and say, oh, it's the Salton Sea area, where really there's violent rain bands, flash flood warnings, severe thunderstorms, winds of 60 to 70 miles an hour, and flash flooding all over the place there, which you can see if you use the Yuma, California radar. Some of the worst flood risk later this evening is actually going to unfold in a stretch where there's not really a lot of radar coverage at all. So the best bet would be for flooding between sort of along the Death Valley, Ridgecrest, interior San Bernardino County kind of region, probably the Edwards Air Force Base radar or the Mount Charleston radar near Las Vegas. But the reality is there's so many mountains and valleys in this region that there's a lot of things that are going to get missed. So there's going to be a heavy emphasis on local storm reports from people on the ground, and rain gauges, which of course aren't affected by radar beams and topography. Even if the radar doesn't look particularly impressive, could be experiencing quite serious flash flooding because simply the radar beams aren't able to detect the heavy precipitation that's falling in some of those regions. So, but increasingly impressive out of Yuma. So if you want to see the most dramatic imagery right now, go to the Yuma, Arizona side. If you want to see the potential center of circulation, though, as it comes it makes a close approach on San Diego, I would use the San Diego radar, just realizing that you're not seeing anything that's happening on the eastern half of the storm, because of course that's on the wrong side of the mountains. So tonight, for now, I've been following the San Diego radar for following the storm center itself, and the Yuma radar for following the extreme tropical downpours that are causing the greatest risk of flooding that we've seen in decades in that part of. Let's see here. What else is going on? So up in Northern California, significant wildfire activity. It continues up in the far northwestern corner of the state. In fact, the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia are experiencing yet another air pollution emergency from extreme smoke pollution from wildfires. There have been a number of out-of-control wildfires that have burned a lot of structures up in British Columbia. There are additional fires in Oregon, Washington, and far northwestern California. None of them look likely to see any meaningful precipitation, unfortunately, from the remnants of Hilary, although some of them up in Pacific Northwest might get some gusty winds as a result, so that won't really help things. On the other hand, I don't think there's likely to be a dry lightning outbreak on the periphery of Hilary, so at least it doesn't look like it's going to ignite new fires, really. How far north and west will the precipitation extend from Hilary in California? Well, there's still some uncertainty about that. I would say there could be some isolated showers or thunderstorms almost anywhere in California over the next 24 hours, but they really will be very isolated north and west of a line from about, say, Sacramento to Big Sur. So in the San Francisco Bay Area, an isolated shower or thunderstorm or two is possible. Up in northwestern California near the fires, that's true too, but generally speaking, no significant or widespread precipitation up there. Most places will stay dry. In fact, if you're in the East Bay Area or over parts of the San Joaquin right now, you can go outside, look up, and see a very sharp edge to the cloud shield associated with Hurricane Hilary. It's extending for hundreds of miles, and it's almost razor straight because of an interesting line of atmospheric convergence. So winds that converge together like this, that's why you can get a straight line in the satellite imagery, and also you'll see it if you look up. So if you're one of the lucky few, right along near where that upper level convergence is occurring, you can literally look up, see clouds 90 degrees in one direction, and then see completely clear skies to 90 degrees to the other horizon. So there's some interesting clouds out there, unlikely going to be significant weather west of that line. Now that does mean there could be a soaking rainfall for much of the Sierra Nevada and parts of the southern San Joaquin Valley, including some of the foothills. So that actually could be good news because a lot of that will be associated not really with much lightning west of the crest. So that will, I think, maybe west of the crest be more beneficial than anything else, more of a novelty. East of the crest, though, especially in the southern Sierra, eastward and southward, and again, from the crest of the Southern California mountains, transverse and peninsular ranges eastward into Nevada, the rain is going to be very, very heavy for many hours to come tonight because the storm, again, is still south of San Diego. And and it's going to move directly overhead. So this storm will likely enter California still as a tropical storm. It may not actually make landfall. Making landfall means it goes from the ocean to land. Whether or not that happens as a second landfall near San Diego is largely immaterial. It will likely be over or just east of San Diego as a tropical storm, and somewhere between San Diego and about Death Valley, it will probably finish its transition to a non-tropical system with still quite strong winds. There are high wind warnings in effect for portions of Nevada and western Arizona, as well as southeastern California. So even after it transitions to a non-tropical system, there will still be strong winds and heavy rain and thunderstorms and flash flood risks. So the impacts don't really change, but it likely will be over California, at least briefly, as an actual classified tropical storm still. So that has yet to occur because the center is still south of San Diego. In fact, I'm looking right now. You can see my eyes going off screen. It's getting closer. Now it's probably only about 50 miles south of San Diego, but it is continuing to move essentially north, maybe even north-northwest. So again, almost exactly paralleling the coastline south of Imperial Beach. I'm continuing to look at those radar screens again. Again, light to maybe moderate rain is inching back into San Diego, but torrential rain bands continue to occur on the east side of the mountains. It looks like there's now some lightning being prediction center, for the first time in a long while, has suggested that there is about a 40% chance of issuing a tornado watch for portions of the interior southeastern California. So again, this would be east of the mountains. This would be a tornado watch mainly from the Colorado River, so the Arizona border, west to the mountains, throughout the low California. That would be rain bands containing severe rotating thunderstorms with some individual embedded supercells. There were a couple of storm chasers who posted a video of a cell that almost produced a water spout over the Salton Sea earlier. That would have been quite the image. That could still happen later today. So there's about a 40% chance of a full-fledged tornado watch from the Storms Prediction Center, but even if that doesn't happen, there's still going to be a chance of, as I mentioned, spin-ups. Previously, I had said these would be most likely along the immediate coast. That's back when we thought that the storm's path was going to be about 30 to 40 miles west of where it probably will end up. So instead, the tornado risk is most likely to now end up in the southeastern California deserts, where there are severe thunderstorms with winds above 60 miles an hour and lots of rotation currently noted. So there could be some interesting images coming out of there. It does look like some of the most intense rain at the moment is sort of centered right near Indio and other portions of the Coachella Valley. And there's just a lot more coming in behind it. So I would expect to see significant flooding images and reports of more significant flooding coming out of there shortly. Again, many hours of that to go, potentially, from about there northward. One of the reasons why there is so much moisture in the air in the deserts right now is that this tropical storm, Hilary, it is inducing deep southeasterly flow. So not only is there the moisture coming from the fact that this is a tropical system that has entrained moisture from the tropics itself and transferred some moisture from the warm tropical oceans to the atmosphere, but also there is what's known as a deep fetch, so a long extent of winds advecting, meaning moving a quantity of moisture from the Gulf of California. So the Gulf of California is like bathtub hot. It is dramatically warmer than the ocean on the Pacific side of the peninsular ranges on Baja California. And as the crow flies, the northern end of the Gulf of California is really only a few tens of miles from the California border. So this is in a very warm body of water. It's not a hugely wide body of water, but it's rather long. And what's happening is that Hilary is causing wind currents to flow parallel to this extremely warm body of water, the Gulf of California, picking up an enormous amount of moisture and then bringing it across the international border into California, right around El Centro, and essentially, and then that moisture is veering westward and slamming up against the eastern slopes of the mountains. So as the desert, so there's a bit of an upward slope in the desert itself. That's why we call it the lower desert, right near the Colorado River. The farther south and east you go, the elevation is lower, and it gets slightly higher as you go north and west in southeastern California. So there is a slight upslope component to flow from the southeast to northwest in that part of the state. Obviously, it's upslope once you get to the Southern California mountains, and then the slope increases dramatically. But upslope flow is conducive to lifting of air parcels and development of clouds and air mass is already convectively unstable, and there is some dynamic lift going on both from the tropical storm and offshore cutoff low, which is helping to draw the storm northward in the first place. All of these ingredients are combining with this deep southeasterly flow and this advection of exceptionally moist air from the Gulf of California to produce torrential rainfall on the eastern slopes of the mountains and in the deserts. And that is why the flash flood risk is so extreme in those regions, and also why it isn't as extreme on the more populated coastal slopes of the Southern California mountains. Now, it is worth noting, and I'm actually going to take my phone for a moment and scroll over since I want to take a closer look at what is happening elsewhere. Yes, it's worth noting that LA County, and all the people who live in LA County, has been under a flash flood warning for hours now. Flash flood risk is more of a street flooding, small stream flooding kind of risk, not quite as severe. In other parts of the county, the risk of debris flows and more severe flash flooding on the Palmdale side of LA County is greater. And so that has been up for a long time now. That may stay in effect for some hours to come, or maybe extended, maybe I should say. I am continuing to see an expansion of those flash flood warnings into parts of Kern County and further north in San Bernardino County. San Bernardino County, by the way, is a huge county, so it in kinds of geographies, climates, and populations from its southwestern corner to its northeastern corner. But let's see here, what else is going on? Let me just switch over to the San Diego radar again and take a closer look, because I think that's what's going to give a better sense of whether the center of circulation of Hilary has ended up closer than it was. Let's see. Yep. So they're okay. So yes, it looks like the center of circulation continues to be almost due south of San Diego now, maybe 40, 50 miles south. Now it also looks like there's a heavier rain band starting to move through from the southwest. So it looks like it's moving over Coronado right now. Just came across the international border. So San Diego is about to get some much heavier rain and probably stronger winds too associated with it. Center of circulation is still to the south of California, so it has not entered California yet, but it will, if not during the remaining half of this live stream, it may shortly thereafter during one of the other live streams later this evening, potentially. So I'm going to switch back so I can just leave this back where I wanted to on the Yuma, Arizona side of things, because that's giving a better view. And then I'll start looking at the camera again because it looks like it's unfocused. So I'm going to have to try and refocus that camera there. So let me just put this back up. All right, you're going to see me awkwardly put my hand near the camera to try and get it to refocus. So bear with me here for a second. This is the very low-tech version of using a slightly less expensive camera. There it goes. I think it refocused, so I think we're back in business. There we go. All right. So I wanna go and take some comments now. Take some questions. Sorry, respond to the comments. I'm gonna go back to the beginning and continue to scroll down. As usual, I won't be able to answer everybody's, but I'm gonna pick and choose. And keep in mind that I'll also be on the ABC live stream later this evening, and then we'll probably I may do another shorter, maybe like a half-hour live stream if the flooding. If there's clear evidence that the flooding has really picked up later this evening as Hilary gets closer. I'll probably as well do another live stream sometime tomorrow, again, time TBD, to talk about what the impacts have been, because I think there will be more reports tomorrow. The storm is moving in a little bit sooner than initially had been predicted, so instead of coming in the middle of the night tonight, it's coming in essentially now and over the next 3 to 4 hours. So it'll be clearer what the effects were as things wind down. All right, there. Yep, I'm seeing some additional, more and more flash flood warnings are getting issued. None of them are getting dropped, it's just new ones are getting issued, so they're starting to accumulate. In fact, by later this evening, I wouldn't be tremendously surprised to see most of Southern California under flash flood warning, except for, again, ironically, possibly some of the coastal areas in San Diego and Orange counties. All right, let's see. I've got a message from Dean Garvey Jazz about an email that was sent to my UCLA email. I'm not sure I've gotten that, so maybe try that one again. I'll take a look again once I can bring my Gmail back up. Some reports of steady rainfall, some that has intensified, and I would expect that to intensify a little bit more. A question from Jake Kaplan about that second landfall. As I mentioned, that's me speculating a bit. It did officially, according to the National Hurricane Center, Hilary did make landfall along the northern coast of Baja California at tropical storm strength, very strong tropical storm strength, actually the highest tropical storm strength designation that you can get without being a hurricane, with sustained winds of 70 miles an hour. I suspect that it's continued to weaken somewhat since then, but it is still a tropical storm until the Hurricane Center says otherwise. And the winds do continue to support that, I think. It is possible, since the center of circulation, as I mentioned earlier, just to reiterate it, it's essentially paralleling the north-northwestward oriented coast just south of Imperial Beach. So whether the center is over land or not will be largely an academic consideration, but it will affect ultimately whether this storm technically makes landfall in California. But that's largely immaterial. The impacts will be the same whether or not that occurs, and it will likely still enter Southern California as a tropical storm, even if it doesn't make landfall per se in Southern California, because it's going to end up over the mountains. It's going to end up over the Southern California mountains as such, no matter what. All right, here. Let's see. Section here. How is the danger for people living along the beach coastline? Don't be dumb. This probably isn't a good day to go hang out on the jetties or on coastal rocks. But generally, I don't think there's extreme risk because there will be big waves. There could be swells from unusual direction. There could be a very minor 1 to 2 foot storm surge. But generally speaking, again, I think this has been a bit misadvertised in certain media outlets because there's people who have apparently cleaned the grocery store shelves in LA and parts of San Diego. This really isn't that kind of storm for the main part of the metro area. The real risk here is the extreme risk of flash flooding east of the mountains and in the mountains and in the deserts. And so in those places, I think a lot of folks did not take this perhaps as seriously as might have been warranted. And then ironically, west of the mountains, because of some of the coverage, I think folks are a little bit more worried about it than perhaps was justified. So as usual, this is a real science and weather communication challenge during an event that does not often happen in Southern California, so it's understandable that there's some confusion. But I think that all in all, it'll be interesting to sort of think about a lot of the way this event was communicated in retrospect. I'm doing the best that I can, but increasingly the social media landscape, and this is not just related to Twitter, but this is generally about social media, it's becoming really difficult to discern what are reliable sources of information, and what are accurately contextualized pieces of information are even harder to find. So it's one thing to get facts that are literally true, but it's another thing to understand them in context. And there were a lot of claims that this hurricane was supposed to hit California as a Category 4 hurricane. Of course, anybody who's been watching these live streams knows that that's pretty absurd for physical reasons, why essentially that can't happen. But certainly it was never predicted to happen, and so the fact that it's not happening is not some overhyped weather service propaganda that isn't coming to pass. It's just a completely fabricated prediction that, of course, isn't happening because A, it's physically impossible, and B, beyond that, there was no indication of anything close to that in California. I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but just so folks have a sense of what the landscape is out there when you talk to your family and friends and neighbors, they may be having a very different experience with this than you are. And this might explain why some folks in the deserts and in the mountains did not take this seriously at all, despite the fact that it actually is potentially still, even as this continues to unfold this evening, a very dangerous flood event, whereas folks along the coast thought that this was Sharknado come to life, where for coastal residents it certainly isn't. So I don't want to negate the fact that for navigators and for people who are on ocean-going vessels, it's not a great evening to be out on the water. And I know of course there lots of surfers will be taking advantage of the large and unusual swells, and that's probably just inevitable in Southern California. But also, the conditions are different than they usually are, and probably more hazardous than they usually are as well. So, that said, I don't think that there's not going to be, a 5-10 foot storm surge. There aren't going to be 50-foot waves. This just isn't that kind of storm. So along the coast, I think reasonable caution is probably good enough. I don't think there's necessarily any reason to freak out more than that. But again, that is in great contrast to the eastern slopes of the mountains, the crest of the mountains, and the deserts, where the flood risk is extremely high and where some places probably are going to see roads washed out, some bridges washed out, some major debris flows, and flooding in places that have not seen it since they've been developed as suburbs and urban areas. That still is in the cards. So it's possible there's already some reports of that starting to unfold now. Based on the radar that I'm seeing, the Coachella Valley really is getting hit very hard right now with torrential rainfall. So perhaps there's some reports. All right, so I'm going to continue to go down the comments. I know I've been meandering a bit. Yes, continuing to check the comments here. And again, a lot of folks reporting that it's not, it hasn't been extreme in your neighborhood. Well, yes, your mileage is going to vary, and as I mentioned, a lot of the highly populated coastal zones are the places, in some cases, they may not be that dramatic at all. But also, again, this event is continuing to ramp up, so the main rain still has not arrived in places like the northern high desert, for example. So there's already rain there, but the most intense rain is yet to come, so just give it a few hours. Comment from Anthony Edwards. It's currently warmer in San Francisco, 78 degrees Fahrenheit, than in Palm Springs, 73 degrees. Which is, interestingly, the warmest temperature so far this year in downtown San Francisco. It's been a weird year. Palm Springs, of course, is socked in with rain, increasingly heavy rain and thunderstorms, and so that is why it's cooler. So, amazingly, Palm Springs may actually have cooled to the dew point. The dew point may actually be about 73 degrees Fahrenheit, so the air literally can't cool any more than that, because essentially you're in fog, in soup fog, at 73 degrees in this extraordinarily humid tropical air mass. So it's actively raining, and it really, you can't cool anymore through cooling the temperature to the dew point, because Palm Springs is essentially already in a cloud. That's remarkable to see out there for sure. So just so folks know, I haven't frozen. I'm just continuing to read the comments here. Yeah, I did want to make a comment about Mexico and the effects on the other side of the international border. One reason why I haven't talked more about them is simply because I don't really have very many sources of information about what's going on. There are some viral videos circulating showing quite extreme flash flooding, where most of the streets in some small towns on both slopes of the Peninsular Range in Baja are experiencing catastrophic flash flooding. I have no way of independently verifying those videos at this point, so I haven't been emphasizing them. Some of them are probably real because they're consistent with the amount of rain that has likely fallen. That is the kind of flooding that might occur later this afternoon and evening on the eastern slopes of the mountains and in the deserts in Southern California. I keep emphasizing that geographic region over and over and over again because it keeps getting misconstrued in almost every place I'm reading about it. Glancing at the radar again, of course, the center of circulation continuing its gradual northward advancement, and those bands of very intense tropical downpours and thunderstorms over the southeastern deserts are continuing. Yeah, it still looks like right now some of the heaviest rain continues to be along and east of the Coachella Valley. So the interstate there, I'm guessing, is probably in not so good of shape right now. Alrighty, let me continue down the list here. Alright, continuing down here. Oh, some folks asking about where I am on social media. I am still on Twitter/X. I'll kind of Dr. Strangelove it. I'm staying there until I can't reasonably stay there any longer. There are a lot of recent decisions that mean that it might be physically impossible for me to remain much longer, so we'll see which of those proposals actually go through, but that might actually be the end. I am really trying to scale up on Blue Sky right now, but the problem, of course, with that is I know many of you haven't been able to join information currently, although that's possibly partly because there aren't that many people on it yet. As far as I know, it's still invitation only, which is why I haven't left Twitter, mainly because I don't think it's fair to folks who don't have those invitations. If you do have an invitation, I can encourage you to take it. There are a few thousand people, I think, on there who know where I am. So you can find me on automatic reposting of Twitter content, which I know isn't ideal, but it's just really difficult to reach mass audiences on Mastodon, so I don't think that's going to be a long-term option for me. I'm really investing heavily in YouTube. Right? There's almost 1,000 people watching right now is a testament to how effective that could potentially be. As I mentioned, I am investing in much better hardware, so these live streams should improve considerably in technical quality sooner rather than later. So YouTube is one place where I'm really going to ramp up these messaging, and especially during major events, I think it's really effective. And I am, you can also find me, as always, on the Weather West blog, weatherwest.com. And then we'll see. I will move to where the people are, essentially, in terms of text-centric social media. So YouTube is going to be my video place, and it remains to be seen where I'll end up for the text-centric stuff later. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about that now, but that's you can find me here on YouTube. I am still on Twitter/X, but looking for alternatives. I am scaling up on Bloom Sky. But also you can find me on the Weather West blog always, as for many years, weatherwest.com. Alright, so continuing down the list of questions and comments. More reports of really widely ranging from light rainfall to much heavier rainfall. Yes, let's see here. Oh, somebody asked for the name of the podcast that I just mentioned just a while back regarding my thoughts on weather apps. That was that was earlier this year. I think if you Google TBD Slate Daniel Swain weather, you'll probably get what you're looking for. All right, continuing to scroll down here. Fog Machine remarks that there are a number of rain gauges north of the San Gabriels that have recorded more than 3 inches of rain the past 12 hours. That's not surprising. Most of those will at least double that, if not triple that, or more. So 6 to 9 inches of rain at least in some of those places. So as I mentioned, there's the majority is yet to come. I did mention the tornado risk. It's mainly east of the mountains, so you're probably not going to see any tornadoes in the coastal plain of Southern California, but you might in the southeastern deserts between now and later this evening. Kind of curious if anybody can see that very sharp line in the clouds over central California, which marks the edge of Hilary's outer cirrus shield interacting with that offshore cutoff low. It really should, I mean, it should be obvious. If you look outside and see it, you won't be wondering if you're seeing what I'm talking about. It'll be quite obvious. But if you do see that, feel free to tag me on Twitter or post a photo to the comment section on Weather West. I'd be curious to see it. Oh, okay, I'm seeing several folks responding that's exactly what they're seeing. I know, I'm a little bit behind. I only started reading the comments about half hour in, so continuing to go down here. All right, let's see here. Continuing to go down. Continuing to check in here. There's a lot of comments. There's not the ratio of comments to questions is higher than on some, which I think comes probably with the territory. I know there's a lot of new folks on the stream right now. Yeah, Rachel comments that she's in the East Bay and it's warm, there's no clouds overhead. I think you're probably a little bit too far to the west, so at that latitude you probably have to be in the Central Valley to see what I'm talking about. Or if you're on a hill looking east, you could probably see it too. Let's see here. No, somebody was commenting did I say 10 miles from the Gulf of Mexico to California? No, to California. People sometimes forget that there is a very warm but narrow body of water that is not all that far from the southeastern border of California. In fact, southern Arizona is actually quite close to a very warm sea in the Gulf of California. Broader, it really refers to the entire region, and it's more commonly used in geographical context. All right, here. Continuing to go down and ask some more questions. All right, well, it sounds like things are starting to escalate. The CHP website is reporting numerous visitors unable to leave Death Valley due to flooding. I am very surprised that the national park did not close to visitors prior to this point. I think, honestly, if you're stuck there now, you're going to be stuck there for a while. So hopefully they're in a safe place well above the arroyos and floodplains, and they're going to be spending a long night in their cars or at the visitor center in all likelihood. So hopefully that's the extent of the problems there, but I suspect that Death Valley is going to see much greater flooding soon. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the LA River is actually running pretty high. It's, the LA River accumulates water from really steep watersheds up all the way up from the San Gabriels. A little bit surprised to see how high the concrete channel was running past Studio City. There is some footage of that. I still don't think that's where the biggest flood risk is going to come from, but it is something to keep an eye on, and it is an indication that it is really raining quite a lot in the mountains right now. That's for sure. Apologies, the comments just jumped. Oh wow. People are reporting, again, this is a significant earthquake in Southern California. Well, that's quite the timing. I'm continuing to scroll down here. This could actually be a bit of a problem interacting with the storm and the water, depending on how large it was. Let me quickly see if... oh wow, so it seems like it was significant to set off the automated warnings. Oh wow, okay, so 5.5 Ojai, Ventura County. This is actually relevant, unfortunately, to the current discussion because that is large enough to cause, potentially, I'm not a geologist, but that is, especially if it was relatively close to the surface, that is enough to cause some damage, and in particular, it is enough to cause rock slides and mudslides, and that could exacerbate the situation with the ongoing heavy rainfall in some places. So this is actually pretty development. Alright, let's see. Okay, getting a lot of conflicting reports about how large it is. Let me quickly check. I'm going to quickly check the USGS site just to make sure I'm not spreading any misinformation. Okay, so it looks like, yes, it was over magnitude 5. It was centered 7 kilometers southeast of Ojai. 14.5 kilometer depth. That's not extremely shallow, but that's relatively shallow. Looks like the accelerometers are in Ventura County reporting some significant shaking. Mercalli magnitude 6. So that is not extreme, but it is definitely very noticeable, a noticeable quake with the possibility of minor local damage. And again, this is a bit relevant in the context of landslides and mudslides amid heavy rainfall in some areas. So this was widely felt throughout the LA basin and along parts of the Central Coast. That's quite the coincidence. So again, epicenter near Ojai was felt pretty strongly in Ojai itself and in Ventura, with lighter shaking elsewhere. I am betting that this probably shook some significant boulders loose amid the rain. So I would expect the risk of big boulders coming down the mountains and some potential landslides would be higher than usual for a quake of that magnitude, simply because of the rain that is falling in many regions. So again, I'm behind in the comments, so let me go down. I guess the aliens could have invaded and I'd find out about it about 10 minutes after it happened. Alright, let me see. Yes, just to confirm, right now the USGS is reporting it as a magnitude 5.1 quake with the possibility of minor damage near the epicenter near Ojai. Okay, Lori Fenton confirms seeing that sharp cloud line in earthquake reports and storm reports right now. I can't say I've ever quite encountered that before. Sounds like there are reports that Caltrans is saying that at least one direction of Interstate 8 is closed due to a large rock slide. Folks reporting additional heavier rain now near San Diego. Borrego Springs, Peter reporting heavy rains are now just intensifying. The prior rain accumulated was about 1 inch so far, and that already produced floodings. Some roads are closing, so sounds like things are picking up there. Again, the comments just jumped. Let me get back here. Continuing down here. All right. Gail reporting that she can see the sharp cloud line in Sacramento. So I'm betting a lot of people probably can see it across the Central Valley, the Eastern Bay Area, maybe the foothills looking west, Bay Area looking east. It's in between the two. Yeah, I co-host a session with Lucy Jones. Let's hope that there is never a dire need to do that. We want there to be a very large earthquake simultaneously with a very large storm in California. That would be a bad combination. Fortunately today, this does not look like, at least the quake that already occurred as of this recording, I should say as of this live session, eventually made a recording is a moderate quake rather than a severe one. So I don't know if it's Lucy Jones worthy or not, but it is notable. Let's see here. A lot of folks speculating about the earthquake. Just want to point out that any earthquake can technically be a foreshock, and generally there's no way to know. It's only a foreshock in retrospect if there ends up being a larger one later. So there's always a low 5% chance that any given moderate earthquake is a foreshock of a larger one. That's what the seismologists message during these events, and so I'm presuming that is similar. In this case, the similar kind of likelihood here. Trending on social media as Hurricane. Well, I knew there'd be some sci-fi original level hashtag to go along with it. All right, continuing to scroll here. Oh yeah, Sharknado is now trending. Well, that's no surprise either. Oh yeah, people are reporting having gotten emergency alerts for earthquakes, flash floods, and severe thunderstorms all within the same hour. That probably is a record in the era of wireless emergency alerts. So save that screenshot. All right, I'm gonna look. I think I'm up to date with the comments right now. I'm gonna take a look at a couple of radars again. I'm gonna try and keep the camera in focus this time by holding the phone closer to the screen. Let's see. Yeah, just lots and lots of rain across the mountains and deserts of southeastern California still. LA County is still under a flash flood warning. So are, let's see. Let me go over to San Diego, see where that center of circulation has moved to in the hour that we've been speaking. That'll take a minute here. Yeah, it looks like that band of heavier rain is moving through San Diego now. Should be some stronger winds too. There are occasional lightning strikes now in San Diego County too. Yeah, it looks like that center of circulation is going to be right along the coast, so there may not be a second landfall, but it might be right along the coast. I mean, it's literally riding right up along that north-northwest oriented coast, coming up through Tijuana, through Imperial Beach and San Diego. So that's what it looks like right now. Just a whole lot of rain out there. Again, as usual, the main story here is going to be the torrential rain on the deserts of southeastern California, the eastern slopes of the mountains, and maybe even a tornado or two out there in the desert. Some more thunderstorms and Salton Sea right now, so still a chance of a Salton Sea water spout if someone gets lucky. Yeah, so the outer spiral bands of Hilary now, these deep torrential convective bands, they now extend well into Arizona, so east of Yuma. So just to give you a sense of how large this gigantic swirl is, this event is nowhere near over for Southern California. In fact, in many areas, the heaviest rain is yet to come. So let me go and check the USGS site again, because folks are reporting other earthquakes. Some of them may be aftershocks or related earthquakes. I'm assuming most of them are smaller than the original, which would probably make them aftershocks. But let me actually verify that there has not been another earthquake somewhere else. Yeah, it looks like these are mainly aftershocks, so this looks like it has a pretty active aftershock sequence. There's a bunch of earthquakes that have occurred between magnitude 3 and 4. So those are noticeable, not damaging, but definitely noticeable earthquakes. So that is a pretty active aftershock sequence. So we'll definitely, I think that will be something to keep an eye on, but for now, not more than that. I would be interested to know if there were any rock slides or landslides in Ventura County primarily, or maybe a bit further east where the rain has been heavier. That is possible. But this was not a very large earthquake. This would qualify as with the possibility of some modest local impacts, but probably not more than that. It is pretty weird to have the USGS website open, as well as the weather radar open at the same time, for a tropical storm moving into Southern California. I can't say I've ever done that before. Let's see. Yep, some flash flood warnings now extending farther west into both San Diego and San Bernardino counties. Obviously not all the way to the coast there still, because the rain just hasn't been that heavy right along the San Diego and Orange County coast, but it is in the mountains for sure. And I'm guessing the level of flash flooding is probably starting to escalate in those areas too. So I don't have access to reports specifically during that period while I'm online right now, because I can't scroll between things. Again, this is just a technical limitation that is frustrating, but will go away this week, I promise. So I will set things up later this week, maybe sooner rather than later, so we'll see. But right now, let me do one final check of the comments, one final check of the radar, and then I might sign off until the next live event later this evening. Again, the next one I'll be on the ABC7 LA live stream later this evening, and then I may also do yet another brief 30-minute or so live stream on my own on this YouTube channel after that, depending on how things go. So let me quickly go down the last 20 or so items in the chat before logging off. No Sharknadoes yet. Somebody did post the perennial shark in the water animated GIF, and jokingly said it was in Death Valley, and then a bunch of people took that seriously. So if my sigh wasn't audible, that was a deep sigh. Let's see. Oh, an interesting question. Has this level of rain ended fire season in Southern California? Well, I certainly wouldn't be worried about fires for the next few weeks. Let's just put it like that. No matter whether there's a big heat wave or even a wind event in the next few weeks, fire risk is going to be low. Has it ended fire season in Southern California? Probably not, because all it takes is a couple of big heat waves and a big offshore Santa Ana wind event to crank up that risk again. So has it mitigated fire season at a critical point? Very possibly in central and portions maybe of the southern Sierra where more rain might fall. Probably not in Northern California because rain will be minimal or non-existent in most places. But from a fire season perspective, in the southern third of the state, certainly, I think this is going to put a big damper on it, certainly for weeks. And we're fairly close to peak season in some spots, so that actually does help quite a bit. Yeah, again, unfortunately, I don't think that there's much hope that this is going to recent update in the northwestern periphery of the precipitation shield, but right now I don't think it's going to extend that far west, so I don't think it will necessarily help. Continuing, almost down at the end of the comments here. Just jumped around again, and all right here, people continuing to report aftershocks, rain, flooding. What an afternoon in Southern California. More folks reporting that sharp cloud line over the Central Valley. Again, it's if you're in the area, Eastern Bay Area, San Joaquin, Sacramento Valley, it's worth at least stepping outside to take a look because it might look pretty cool. If it lingers, by the way, towards sunset, it could make for a pretty spectacular sunset because it's open to the west and very increasingly thick clouds to the east, which is a classic recipe for a dramatic sunset. So could be a good sunset watching evening, and if you're on the either right under that razor's edge or west of it. Okay, I think I'm gonna call it a live stream right now, and you can find me again later on the actual ABC live stream later this evening, and then I may or may not, depending on how things go, do another brief YouTube live stream later this evening. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for continuing to support. And I think this is probably record turnout based on the statistics that I that's great to see. I'll be fixing the hardware problem, so if you've seen stream skipping today, that's not just you, that's me too. It's frustrating, I know it, I'm working on it, and I think we should have it